And it continues. I believe we will have one, possibly two more. And one more time. This is by far the longest section we have, so don't think it's going to be like this all the time. So let's start talking about some angles. We learned about our quadrantial angles, 0 degrees, 90 degrees. And then in our last video, we talked about 30 degrees and 45 degrees, and 60 degrees as well. And we found a few things to be true. Sine of 30 is equal to a half. Cosine of 30 is equal to the square root of 3 over 2. And we found out that tangent of 30 is 1 over the square root of 3. We also found that sine of 45 degrees was equal to the square root of 2 over 2. Cosine of 45 degrees is also equal to the square root of 2 over 2. And tangent of 45 degrees is equal to 1. Sine of 60 is equal to the square root of 3 over 2. Cosine of 60 is equal to 1 over 2. And we found out that tangent of 60 was equal to the square root of 3. So that's what we did in our last video. We just found those values, those common angles that we're going to use over and over and over. And then I gave you that thing telling you, like, being a jerk about it, being like, don't even show up to the midterm if you don't know those. There's no chance of passing. I just like to give you very, very clear expectations. I don't want you coming into the midterm and like, oh, I'm going to pass this. And you don't know those values. It's just never going to happen. So, all right. Now, the quadrantial angles. Sine of 0 degrees was 0. Cosine of 0 degrees was 1. Tangent of 0 degrees was 0. And then we go to 90s. And we found out that, whoop, that's not how you'd write an S. Sine of 90 was 1. Cosine of 90 is 0. And tangent of 90 is undefined. If you know all of those values, you're awesome. This is what we want to work towards, is knowing all of these values. Now let me show you a table that can be helpful for this. So we're going to do some more videos in a second where we're going to switch all those degrees to radians. But I just want to keep speaking degrees for right now. So let me make a simple table for you. I found that almost all students write this table down as soon as they receive an exam, because there's some helpfulness to it. I don't even want to write tangent yet. Let's just leave it as sine and cosine. Now we need to know this for certain angles. So what we're doing is we're putting all of our angles over here, and then our ratios go here. The ratios of the triangle. Angles on the left, what sine and cosine are on the right. So let's start. We have a 0 degree. Then we're going to go to 30, 45, 60, and 90. Oops, I'm going to need one more. There we go. So 0 degrees, 30 degrees, 45 degrees, 60 degrees, and 90 degrees. And now I'm just going to pop in the values. So it goes, let me do it in a different color. Yeah. Sine of 0 is 0. Sine of 30 is 1/2. Sine of 45 is root 2 over 2. Sine of 60 is the square root of 3 over 2. And sine of 90 is 1. Now, if we do this same pattern, see, how it goes 0, 1/2, where root 2 over 2, root 3 over 2, root 4 over 2. Oops, I mean 1. Well, cosine's going to work the opposite direction, where we're just moving up now. The same numbers. It's just our same numbers. Now, I just memorized sine and cosine. Tangent comes for free. Tangent will always be sine divided by cosine. And I'm not sure if I've really even defined it. I've just been hinting around to you. Tangent is sine over cosine. It's sine divided by cosine's value. Not the angles, the ratio on the outside. So we look and we're like, well, what's 0 divided by 1? That's 0. That was true. Now, if we just look at the numerators, what's 1 divided by the square root of 3? It's 1 divided by the square root of 3. Oh, cool. What's the same picture divided by the same picture? That's 1. What's the square root of 3 divided by 1? The numerator of sine divided by the numerator of cosine. That's root 3. And lastly, what's 1 divided by 0? That's undefined. Have that table down. And then now let me step away from being an actual teacher and let me be more of a tutor for a second. Let me be more of a tutor. Let me write something out. Oops. I didn't erase everything from the last video. There we go. So let's just discuss sign. And let's look at those numbers. So 0 is the same thing as the square root of 0 over 2. You believe me? I think you believe me, don't you? 1/2 is the same thing as the square root of 1 over 2. Root 2 over 2 is the square root of 2 over 2. But that's the root 2 over 2. You're like, why did you write equals 3 times? I'm just writing these values down right here. It's making a list so you can see there's a counting principle here. Next is the square root of 3 over 2, which is the square root of 3 over 2, which is the square root of 3 over 2. But notice what we're doing right here. Square root of 0 over 2, square root of 1 over 2, square root of 2 over 2, square root of 3 over 2. We're counting the numbers. It's the square root of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're all over 2. Lastly, we could say that 1 is the same exact thing as the square root of 4 over 2. The square root of 4 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So we're counting. We're just counting. Square root of 0 over 2, square root of 1 over 2, square root of 2 over 2, square root of 3 over 2, square root of 4 over 2. Go the opposite direction. Square root of 0 over 2, square root of 1 over 2, square root of 2 over 2, square root of 3 over 2, square root of 4 over 2. And then tangent is just sine divided by cosine. There is a pattern here. It is merely a pattern. And if you can memorize the pattern rather than trying to memorize every value, I should write down every value for you and let you see what sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, and cotangent's values are. And good effing luck trying to memorize all those. Good luck. If we try and do this in more of a pattern way, dude, it's going to be great. It's going to be great. So this table here, you don't know those values for the midterm, there's no point in showing up. Before you move to section 2.3, you better have these values down and working with them, or else you're going to find continued struggles. Pretty much the answer to, I'd say 90% of the problems on your next test, all the answers are in purple. These will be your answers. Or maybe the reciprocals flipped over for cosecant, secant, and cotangent. But I want to stress it again. Know these values in one way or another. There's also something called a hand trick. You can find that on YouTube. I won't do it myself. It's called the hand trick in YouTube. Maybe, I don't know, there might be some crazy shit in there. Sorry. Hand trick. I'm like, that might take you to a website you don't want. Hand trick trig. You do that, it's going to show you some better videos than I'll ever make you, and I'll show you that there's some. If you got a hand, you got 5 fingers. That includes thumbs. Then you can use what's called a hand trick as well. But I'm gonna let you do you. Once again, know these values. It's huge. So our next video is I'm just going to replace all the degrees and make them radians. So if you already know that 0 degrees is 0 radians, 30 degrees is pi over 6, 45 degrees is pi over 4, 60 degrees is pi over 3, and 90 degrees is pi over 2, maybe skip over that next video. All right. See you in the next. Or not.